Hello, this is Donna Phillips with Parrotwood Memorial Library, and we were so blessed to get an American Rescue Humanities Grant for Libraries from the American Library Association, the National Endowment for Humanities, and our project is learning through epidemics and pandemics throughout the United States history. And today we're focusing on polio and interviewing people that have had polio. Miss Ginger Spradlin here is going to do the interview, and we hope you learn something from this. And thank you to all our participants that's joining us in this documentary of polio.
Thank you. Well, like she said, I'm Ginger Spradlin, and this nice lady is Miss Brenda Davis, and she has agreed to let us interview her about her case of polio. Miss Brenda, where were you and how old were you when you first had polio?
I'm not 100% sure about the date and the age. I was probably 3 or 4. That would have been 1957 or 58. I grew up in East Nashville, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. So I was the only child at that point. So, my mother had a small baby. So, but I was, there was some situations that started back then.
All right. Okay. What was your very first symptom of polio? How did they recognize that you possibly had polio?
Well, my right leg would go into like these spasms, and I couldn't stop it. And unless I would sit down and like hold my right leg and very tight and made it stop. And this would, my mother was very concerned about this, so she took me to the doctor. And there was about the same time that my leg would just give out and I would start falling. So she took me to the doctor, the pediatrician at that point.
So then were you diagnosed fairly straight away, say within a day of the symptoms first occurring, or was it long?
The doctor sent me on to a pediatric orthopedic doctor, which in Nashville, Tennessee, and in downtown Nashville. And he was he was very, it was new, I guess. So he did a lot of different tests. I have a little memories of me bending over and him running his hand down my spine. I remember having to walk down the hall and him watching me. It took several trips for me to go before they decided that I had a slight case of, I don't know what kind of polio and it had settled into my right leg.
So you don't remember ever having a really bad fever and headache or anything like that?
No, I was a little sick, but not like what a lot of people have gone through. I always said when people find out, which I didn't talk about it for so many years, but in the later years I've had to own it. I always said I was a lucky survivor because there was so many people that A, weren't survivors, and B, they had to go through lots more than I did. Okay.
All right. Do you know what type of polio you had? I know there's different types.
I've attempted years back to get the from the doctor, and that has been, I just gave up finally. So I don't know.
That's fine. A lot of times people don't know, and sometimes they're never told. And you were little, so that would be another reason for you not knowing. What kind of treatments were you given for your case of polio?
The doctor, I remember enough to know that the doctor said that evidently there was also scoliosis involved, and he said that my right side was growing faster than my left side, so they put a brace that I only had to wear during the day, and during night I could take it off, but I had to wear this 3 or 4 years, and
Were
So
you wearing it by the time you started to school?
yes, I was in the, I think 3rd grade was when I finally was able to take it off. So I remember, and back then you started school lots earlier. So I was probably 4 when this all, so I started school. So, there was 3 or 4 years that I was wearing it. And I went out into the shed. I found my brace if you want to see it.
Oh, yes, please show it, because that's something that we don't know about.
I don't know if you can see that.
So how far did it go up on your body when you were a little girl?
This would be on my right leg, and that would be this part right here would be right below my knee.
Okay.
And it actually would bend, and so
You kind of had limited movement was sort of the idea.
right.
Okay. So you never had any kind of surgeries, like we hear things about them trying to lengthen a leg maybe that was, okay.
I was a very lucky survivor.
Yes. In other words, did in your recovery process, you said it was just about maybe 4 or 5 years that you had to wear the brace, and then by 3rd grade, did you feel like you had almost recovered fully, or was there still some weakness in the right leg?
I always refer to my right leg as my gimp leg.
Gimp leg. Okay.
That was the word I gave it. I didn't give it a name. I just said my gimp legs, because the calf on that leg is so much smaller than the other legs. So with that being said, I would wear pants more. I was luckier to be in a time that women could start wearing pants.
Right.
So I wore pants. Or if I wore a dress, it usually was a long dress that covered up my legs. I just didn't like anybody seeing my legs, because it opened up a conversation, and
Right.
I didn't want the conversation to
In other
start.
words, you wanted to be normal, whatever normal is.
My mother always told me that I was normal. My mother was more like the mother in Forrest Gump, where, Brenda, you're fine. You're just like everybody else. You can do anything.
Well, how did you handle physical education in school and things like that?
There's an interesting, there's something I've been writing down of my memories. And I'm going to read you just a little passage.
Okay, that's fine. We're not crunched for time in any way. We're fine.
I went into the stupid blue uniforms that we used to have to wear in gym.
Right. Oh, I remember those. Ours were blue also, oddly.
I've got a picture of it, and we're not even going to go there, but these, for a regular girl, that probably was, but I was a little hefty during that time, and so everything just didn't work on those blue things. Now the uniforms, let's get to the gym class. There was nothing, and I mean nothing, that I was remotely good at in gym class. I was like a fish out of the water. Basketball, kickball, dodgeball, all of it was bad. Of course, the first thing that you did whenever you played was to pick the teams. This was even worse than the blue uniforms that I had to wear. The gym teacher would pick 2 team captains, and they took turns choosing numbers and members for your team. I was either the last or the next to the last to be chosen. I mean, if you were a team captain, would you pick Myra, the really skinny girl with the breathing problems and her voice was as small, or that big girl, Brenda, the one with the skinny polio leg and who could not jump or run and was afraid of any ball, no matter what kind of ball it was? I get it as an adult, or how it worked back then. But as a 14-year-old, back then, I felt like the biggest loser in the world. Of course, I survived and nobody died, but a small part of my insides was injured. I will never wish this feeling on any child, but I know that it happens still and happens today. And I so remember the rolling of eyes when I did not kick or catch the ball. I remember how running laps on the field or in the gym or however many times everybody would pass me, maybe 2 times even sometimes. I remember how I felt when everybody was standing around and waiting for me to finish my laps so they could finish the gym class and go get dressed. One of my biggest wishes for my grandchildren is that they will not feel that chosen last feeling. And I go on and this and that, but you see how even though
There's a scar there.
there was situations in my life, but I've overcome that. But you know, it permanently damages you inside. And
That does make sense. And I don't think, since I know I'm 65 and when I was in school, we didn't have special education. So you weren't used to seeing students that were different. I think maybe special education has made that less of a problem today for kids than it was at the time that you were growing up. But I can certainly understand that. Just like you said, were you going to be chosen next to last or last? That's sad. That's really sad, but I can understand that. Okay. Next question. Were you the only victim of polio at that time in your family or in your community?
Yes, I've spoken to my sister about, when I was writing my memoirs, I was asking her if and how it affected her. She says she doesn't have any memories of that. Her big sister had to wear the brace, because I have to contribute that to my mother, because my mother was so intent that I was just like everybody else.
Right. Okay. Well, that was one of my other questions, is I wondered if your siblings, had any particular attitude about, because then basically she didn't even really know that you had polio, I guess, or wasn't made to think about it.
It was one of those things that we did not talk about a whole lot. She knew that I had to wear the brace, and I would, my mother made it, it was one of those things that we just didn't talk about it. As I didn't talk about it when I was older, when people would notice that I was limping, I always went to my go-to answer, because I didn't want to be different. Like, well, that's an old football injury. I used to be a linebacker. And they, if they would laugh, and it would take
the tension away
from where I wanted it to, where I thought it was going.
Okay. Now, I know you've already discussed your mother's can-do attitude of, you were like everybody else, but were you made to feel ashamed that you had polio, or like, did she maybe do away with any pictures of you when you had polio or anything like that?
It was funny. Didn't realize it till I was grown. I was not made to feel bad. Again, my mother put me in a category that you could do anything you wanted to. And she was very a hands-on mother. The 50s mothers usually were, and it was a different situation. And where was I going with this? What was the question? I'm sorry.
I was asking you, were you made to feel ashamed that you'd had polio, or did your mother destroy pictures of you when you were little and you had polio?
I didn't realize until I was a big girl and I was looking back and I was actually writing that I don't have pictures of me. My mother always made pictures from my waist up and this and that. It was never discussed, but I'm wondering, did she do that on purpose? Because I was looking for my brace to be in the picture, and I can only find one picture
that showed the
brace. And it was because my sister actually pointed it out. She goes, is that your brace laying over there on this in the grass? And I'm like, I zoomed in. I'm like, yes, I had taken my brace off because we had walked. It was one of those situations where we had taken a walk and it was really, really hurt me. And I had taken, and we was like, wait, I gotta wait. Wait. And so, for some reason I had taken a picture, and that was the only picture that I have of that. And I won't, because you have to really zoom in to even look at it.
Well,
I do have,
go ahead.
There was one other thing that I wanted to read that kind of pertained to that, as far as being ashamed. In a second grade play, I was Sleeping Beauty. Mama made me a beautiful dress. It was yellow with yellow netting all over it. This made the dress fluffy. Mama curled my hair and made me to be the most beautiful Sleeping Beauty there was. There it is. I did not feel beautiful. Beautiful Sleeping Beauties did not have to wear a stupid leg brace. See, I had polio when I was young, and I wore this brace on my right leg all the way up to my knee. And I remember so excited when I got dressed. And then I looked down in the long mirror, and I could see that pretty dress and that ugly brace sticking out from under the bottom of my dress. Mama was supposed to make the dress all the way to the floor, but I could see that stupid brace still sticking out of the bottom of my dress. I was a princess, and princesses are not supposed to have to wear a brace. I was very sad all the way to the play, and I did not complain, but Mama knew I was sad. And she kept telling me how beautiful I was. When I got to school, I forgot about my sadness, and my sadness turned into excitement because everybody else was excited, and I got excited too. I won't tell you read the rest of it, but you know, that's
Well, probably because everybody else was looking at your pretty dress your mama had made and your pretty curls that she had done.
See that.
Oh, yes. Yes, we can. And see, that's what everybody else was focusing on. But I can understand your, thing of, oh no, I've got to wear this crazy thing. Okay.
All I saw was that, that even though, but I learned to, everybody else is excited, so I forgot it. That was, the.
Well, that's a good story then.
Yes.
One of the things that some of the other people I've interviewed wanted me to ask them, and I didn't have it on my list of questions, but did having polio in any way influence what vocation that you chose as you grew up?
I knew, it's interesting because at the beginning and when I was in high school, I was really interested in hair and cosmetology, and I thought that I would like to go to that. And then I thought more about how I'd have to be standing all the time. And so I weaned away from that. And so I got into banking, and, it did, but it didn't, I see what I'm saying. And that I knew there was certain things that I could not do. There was certain things as far as standing a long periods of time, which I don't have. I have problems with that now. I don't even walk very good.
Well, that's really our next question. Have you experienced any post-polio symptoms?
A lot.
Okay.
I don't even know if we want to go into all the list of things that.
Well, if you can even just highlight 2 or 3 things that have come up with your post-polio. Because I frankly know till I started talking to Miss Nikki Lancaster about this, that there even was such a thing. I thought once you had polio and you got reasonably better or whatever better you got,
right,
that was stable. And I didn't understand that there was post-polio. So I'm sure that some of our listeners are not going to know about post-polio either.
I had written down, I remember the very first time that I even found out there was such a thing as post-polio. I did not even know that this existed. And this was back in the 1980s. I was in the library and looking at books, due to my children were in the storybook reading in another room. And I was sliding my fingers sideways, running my fingers across the books on the shelf. And my finger landed on a book about living and dealing with post-polio. I was so astonished. I took it out and looked at the symptoms, and it was just like they were writing about me. I've had a ruptured disc in my neck that was fused when I was 38 years old. I don't know if I had my appendix ruptured when I was 5 years old. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I had a complete emergency hysterectomy when I was 38 years old. Later on, I found out that this was part of the, because your body's off kilter. I have arthritis now in every joint, and I have trouble walking and standing. And my spine is just a mess. But I concentrate on the positive because there's so many people that it could be lots worse.
Yes, yes.
I'm not even going to get into a lot of the other situations, but
you have had post-polio symptoms for sure.
Yes.
Okay.
It was interesting. I went in, I got into my book and I was reading things, and I forgot about, he said his wife had her polio in her right leg, which is exactly where I had it. And then the doctor said, well, when you have post-polio, it affects all the rest of your joints and everything else. And I forgot that was the situation. I was very lucky and that I did not have to do all of and deal with a lot of the things that I thought that was with polio until I was older. And now
So you had somewhat worse time with post-polio than the original.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Well, the last question I want to ask you is, Miss Brenda, is there anything you'd care to share with us about your experience with polio that we haven't covered in the questionnaire?
I think that being a polio survivor, and with my mother being very positive and making sure that I felt like that I was not different from anybody else, I wanted to go as far away from that as I could during the time that my kids and I was, raising my children and this and that. And like I said, going away from it, the conversation and this and that, stopping it when this and that. With that being said, I've cut off my nose to spite my face type thing, where a lot of the times now I'm learning, people at work did not realize my limitations, and they were getting worse and worse. And so I was forced to actually bring it out. An example was my immediate supervisor. He knew that I had post-polio, but I didn't want anybody else to know about it. I didn't.
Right.
And then he had a discussion with me. It's like, well, I've got to let these managers that you're going to all the different branches, them to know. And I'm like, okay, but promise me that they won't discuss with the other employees in there. I was very private about, I didn't want them to know for some reason. That threw me into a different situation where I'm different.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that in and of itself was saying, hey, I'm not normal, and you didn't want to be not normal? Is that sort of a way to say that?
Right. And I'm learning to, it's in your face. I can't do anything about it now. I'm sitting down, and when I'm looking and sitting down, people think I'm normal. You don't realize, and I'm more and more people are, walking and getting around, and people are very conscientious to, oh, they need to help this old woman. I'm like, it, I have to learn to accept it, whereas my first thought is, oh, don't, I'm fine, you know, but
Well, that's what
I'm
Miss
learning to
Nikki
accept it now.
Lancaster told us too. She said, I'm trying to tell people with post-polio, the scooter is their friend. It's all right to say, I don't do that anymore, or I can't do that today. We might plan that 3 days from now.
Exactly. You know, all of the grandchildren, I'm making little baskets for Easter. I just have to start really, really early because I can't stand for long periods of time and do what I need to do to glue and this and that. So, but I'm lucky in that, you know what, there's people that can't do this. So I have to always remember the positive things. So I try to be positive.
It
There's
sounds
days
like
when I
you're
was like,
positive.
"Ah, I'm not positive today."
Well, we thank you so much for being willing to do this.
Thank
And
you.
we think that people in the future will be so glad that you shared with us about your story of polio. Again, Miss Brenda Davis, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.